Soyuz 11, terrifying last moment in space. Something tragic happened in the early hours of June 30th, 1971. The much-anticipated, triumphant return of 3 cosmonauts from the Soyuz 11 spacecraft, returning from a mission in the space station in orbit, turned out to be tragic. The 3 astronauts had been found dead. They died in space en route to Earth. The 3 astronauts were Vladislav Volkov, Georgi Dobrowolski, and Viktor Patsayev. The retrieval team had waited to receive them in a remote region of Kazakhstan. Soyuz 11 touched down on Earth safely, no sign of anything wrong on the retrieval team's arrival. But opening the shuttle, the astronauts were found on their seats, dead, with their face covered in blue blotches and rivulets of blood coming out of their ears and eyes. To this day, they are the only humans to have died while in outer space. Their mission was successful, having spent more than 23 days in the orbit, occupying history's first space station. Their achievements for the Soviet Union were fitting to the US achievement of taking the man to the moon. The 3 crew members also broke previous space endurance records kept by another Soyuz crew in 1970, which was about 18 days. Soyuz 11 and the last moments in space. Soyuz was a series of spacecraft designed by the Korolev Design Bureau in the 1960s. It was designed for the Soviet space program. The Soviet Union believed that the moon program was no longer critical like it before. They focused on creating a more prolonged presence in space by establishing the Salyut 1 space station. As a result, in 1971, Salyut became the first space station launched into orbit in human history. The Salyut required missions from Earth to refuel. The Soyuz rockets were tasked with supplying the stations. The first resupply mission was launched with the Soyuz 10 on April 22, 1971. The rocket managed to get to the space station but had a problem. The ship's computer had problems, causing them not to dock with it successfully. The mission was abandoned and the Soyuz returned to Earth. On return, the crew had problems, resulting from a malfunction in the air supply, which began filling the capsule with toxic fumes. The fumes knocked out one of the crew members on board. The entire crew survived. The Salyut was still in orbit and needed refueling. Another mission was organized to resupply the space station. The Soyuz 11 was tasked with resupplying the space station. It launched in June and landed at the space station successfully. The docking was successful and the crew entered the station. On arrival, the crew were greeted with a haze of smoke brought about by malfunction in the ventilation system. The 3 crew members, a fulfilling stay on board Salyut from where they made live television broadcasts while communicating with the mission control. The crew even celebrated the birthday of Patsayev, who had turned 38 while on the mission. The crew members toast juices on the birthday boy, even casting their votes and showing support for the Communist Party at the time. On board, they had also exercised using treadmills, which always vibrated the entire station when in use. On the 11th day of their stay, there was an electrical fire breakout. They managed to put it out. Throughout their stay on board, each of the crew members conducted their scheduled experiments. They had an emphasis on humans, on the study of human performance under prolonged weightlessness and reactions. The Soyuz was large enough, about 21.4 meters long, and a total living space of about 100 cubic meters, providing the cosmonauts a place to carry out scheduled experiments, relax, and sleep. The crew transferred their scientific records, film, and logbooks to Soyuz while preparing for the journey back home. After a record-breaking stay in space, the cosmonauts had planned to journey back home. They returned to the Soyuz for re-entry burn to Earth. The 3-man crew was ready to return to Earth. After their successful mission, the commander of the crew, Dobrowolski, gave a report of successful undocking from the space station. On what has been expected to be trouble, the free journey proved otherwise. On re-entry back to Earth, nothing was heard from the capsule by mission control. The recovery team was patiently waiting for them. On arrival, they couldn't believe what they were presented with on opening the capsule. The 3-person crew were motionless and trapped in their seats. It was clear they had been asphyxiated. Outward, no damage was recorded. The recovery team had knocked on the capsule sides but got no response. Opening the hatch, the crew were in their couches, motionless and not moving. the hard dark blue patches on their faces and blood trails from their noses and ears. The recovery team tried to remove them from the descent modules. One of the crew members, Dobrowolski, was still warm. The doctors who had arrived at the scenes tried to give artificial respiration. According to their findings, the cause of death was a result of suffocation. On arrival to Earth, the craft landed on the side, making the body's extraction very difficult. Many attempts were made to revitalize the men. The warmth of Dobrowolski's body made them try harder to save the crew members' lives. Under further investigation and findings, it was determined that an air vent had been jerked open during the separation of the orbital and descent modules. The investigation further stated that the three-person crew might have been dead half an hour before reaching to Earth. The reports further stated that they might have been exposed to vacuum for at least 11 minutes at that time at an altitude above 100 kilometers. Recovery teams stood no chance of saving the lives of the cosmonauts as they had been dead for far too long. En route to Earth, the Soyuz 11 landing was automatic. The capsule ran a programmed re-entry, no need for living pilots, making them land safely despite being dead. The three crew members' death occurred 104 miles above the atmosphere, making them the only human beings to have ever died in space. The official autopsies of this incident from Budenko Military Hospital found the cause of death correct for the cosmonauts was hemorrhaging of the brain's blood vessels, with a lesser amount of bleeding under their skin, in the inner ear and the navel cavity, resulting from exposure to a vacuum environment that caused the oxygen and nitrogen in their bloodstreams to bubble and rupture vessels. State burial held for the cosmonauts. The tragedy brought about an unexpected wave of mourning. People cried openly in the streets for the three men who had been appearing nightly on their television screens for 3 weeks. Their funeral was held. Many people in the entire Soviet wept. The bodies were laid in state, each of the men dressed in a civilian suit, dazzling with the gold stars of a hero of the Soviet Union. Thousands of people, including the dead crew members' families, filed past the open coffins to pay their final respects. They were buried in the Kremlin Wall necropolis at Red Square, Moscow, near the remains of the great Yuri Gagarin. The site where they first landed in Kazakhstan was placed with a memorial monument in the form of a 3-sided metallic column with the engraved image of each crew member's face set into a stylized triangle on each of the 3 sides near the top. The men risked their lives to broaden our horizons. They are heroes and should always be remembered. They risked their lives, paving the way for advancement in space technology and science.